Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph, and we'll be learning today, Mirz Hashem, Daf Mem Amid Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchas Tefillin, and we pick up today on the bottom line of the Shulchan Aruch on Lamed Tes Amid Beis, Siman Lamen, Sif Gimel. We have been discussing Zman Hanachasan, the proper time for putting on Tefillin. We learned yesterday that the mitzvah of Tefillin begins. In other words, what's the earliest time you could put on Tefillin? That begins at the time that we call Mishayakir, the time when it's light enough outside that you can recognize an acquaintance of yours, somebody who you know, but you don't know so well, Berichuk Dalan Amis. When he's 4 Amis away from you, you could recognize him. That's the earliest time that you're allowed to put on Tefillin. Now let's remember some other things that we learned yesterday. We paskin that Midaraisa Laila Zman Tefillin. Really, at night, you're allowed to wear tefillin. Laila Zman Tefillin. That's the way we paskin. However, the Chachamim made a gzera, and the Chachamim said it's also to wear tefillin at night. Why? Because you might fall asleep while wearing tefillin. What's the problem with sleeping while you're wearing tefillin? The problem is sheba yafiach behen. You might come to pass gas inadvertently while you're sleeping. Therefore, the Chazal made a gzera, and they said it's aser midrabanan to wear tefillin at night. Now, against that backdrop, we begin Sif Gimel, bottom line, Lamed Tes Amid Beis. The Mechaber says, Hayaroitza lotzeis loderech bahashkama. If somebody has the need to travel early in the morning, he has to get up early and he has to leave. And the Mishnah Berurah says over here, Ois Katan Yud, lotzeis loderech, he has to get up early to go on a journey. So what? How does that affect tefillin? Explains the Mishnah Berurah, if he doesn't put on the tefillin now, before he sets out on his journey, it's going to be difficult for him to put on the tefillin, mipnei hakor, possibly because of the cold. Maybe he's going out on a journey, it's very cold outside, whatever he's going to be traveling in is not heated, and it's extremely cold. He won't be able to roll up his sleeves, uncover his head, in order to put on his tefillin. Or he brings down from the Chai Adam, or there may be other reasons why on the journey it's going to be impossible for him to put on the tefillin. But be what it may, he wants to get up. He's leaving early. Afilu kaidem amod hashachar. He's leaving even before dawn. So forget before the Zman of Mishayakir. He wants to put on his tefillin before dawn because he's setting out on a journey before dawn. Let's go back to the Mechaber. So he wants to set out on a journey early in the morning, certainly before the time of Mishayakir, perhaps even before dawn. Manicham, he could put them on now, even though it's night. The day has not yet begun. So it is night, and we learned yesterday that there's an issur d'Rabbanan. You're not allowed to put on tefillin at night. In this case, this individual is allowed to put on tefillin at night. Explains the Mechaber why. First, he says, top line Mem Amid Aleph, Ukishiyagiyaz Manon, when the time of Mishayakir arrives, Yemashmesh Bahem, at that point he should feel the tefillin, V'yavarech, and make a bracha. So what's the Mechaber saying? He could put on the tefillin early in the morning, before Mishayakir. However, he's going to put them on without a bracha. When the Zman of Mishayakir arrives, at that point he should feel the tefillin and make a bracha. Now explains the Mechaber, why is he allowed to put on the tefillin at this time, even though it's night? Explains the Mechaber, because at this point, when he got up early in the morning and he's setting out on a journey, there really is no makaim to be worried that he's going to fall asleep. Kevin Shehishkim Yotza because he got up, he got dressed, and now he's going and he's journeying. So we're not afraid at this point that he's going to fall asleep. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Ois Katan Yud Beis, bottom line, Lamed Tes Amid Beis. Manicham, he should put on the tefillin kaidem yitziyasai before he sets out on his journey. And furthermore, says the Chavetz Chaim, v'yochar lechavein shaloiv sham l'shem mitzvah. When he puts them on, he could even have in mind that he's putting them on l'shem mitzvah. Kevin the Karmelon Laila Zman Tefillin, because we paskin Laila Zman Tefillin. According to the Mandi Amar that holds Laila Lavzman Tefillin, if nighttime midaraisa is not a zman for the mitzvah of tefillin, then if you would put on the tefillin at night and you would have kavanah to be bekayim the mitzvah, you would be over on Baal Tosef. But over here, you're not over on Baal Tosef because midaraisa Laila zman tefillin. Really, you're allowed to wear tefillin at night midaraisa. There's only Gzera D'Rabbanan that you're not allowed to wear tefillin at night. But over here, they relaxed the Gzera for the reason given by the Mechaber, because there really is no reason to be concerned that he's going to fall asleep. And therefore, the reasoning of the Gzera doesn't apply. So now that we're relaxing the Gzera, and we're allowing this person to put on tefillin even though it's night, he can even put them on l'shem mitzvah. So v'yochel l'chavin shaloy v'shem l'shem mitzvah, kevin the kaimel l'laylas man tefillinu. Va'afilu hayolay makam l'shamran. And this halacha applies even if the only reason he's putting on the tefillin early is, let's say, like the Chavetz Chaim said earlier, because he's not going to be able to put them on during the journey because of the cold. But as far as the tefillin are concerned, there is no issue, let's say, that he wants to put them on because he can't protect them. He doesn't have a safe place to put them. No, he has a place to put them. They can be very well protected. The problem is with Nakar or some other reason. That's why he wants to put them on now. Still in all, he's allowed to put them on now. Gam Kain Mutter L'Lavshan, he's allowed to put them on now. Since there's no reason for us to be worried that he's going to fall asleep. Now, this is one of those Mishnah Berurahs where you could read through this Mishnah Berurah from the word va'afilu to the end, and you read through a line and a half. There doesn't seem to be a very big chiddush over there. And, you could just blow by it without paying too much attention. But like I've said a million times, the Chavetz Chaim does not say anything just because he had extra room on the page. What the Mishnah Berurah is telling us over here, he's alluding to a machlokes Rishonim in the Gemara in Menachos. Rashi does not hold like this. Rashi does not hold of this psak of the Mechabers. According to Rashi, the only time you're allowed to put on the tefillin at night is if you have a problem of protecting the tefillin. If the reason you want to put them on before you go out on your journey is because on the journey you won't have a safe place to put them, then you're allowed to put them on according to Rashi. But the problem is that you won't be able to put them on because of the cold. Then Rashi does not allow you to put them on at night. So the Mishnah Berurah over here with the afilu is telling us that we don't paskin like Rashi. If afilu ayolay makam l'shamran, gam kein mutter l'lavshan, kevin delek l'meichash l'shem yishem behem ukedelekame. Now we go to Ais Katan Yud Gimel. The Mechaber said you put them on early. Ukishiyagiyaz manon, when we reach the proper time of the mitzvah of tefillin, when we reach the zman of Mishiyakir, then the Mechaber said Yemashmesh behem v'yavarech, then you feel the tefillin and you make a bracha. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Da'afti yitir Chazal lahaktem ha'hanocha b'layla. Even though in this case the Chazal allowed you to put on the tefillin at night, because there doesn't seem to be any room to have a worry that the person is going to fall asleep. But when it comes to the bracha, Chazal were not comfortable with the idea that you're going to make a bracha asher kedishanu b'mitzvaysa v'tzivanu to put on tefillin at night, because midrabanan you're not supposed to put on tefillin at night. So put them on, yes, but make a bracha, no. You can't make the bracha until later when you hit the zman of Mishiyakir. Nevertheless, if somebody forgot this halacha and he did make a bracha before putting them on while it was still night, he doesn't have to repeat the bracha because he put on the tefillin and he was bekayim the mitzvah. He put on the tefillin during the night, but we paskin Laila's man tefillin. So he was yoytze the mitzvah. So he made a bracha, he was yoytze the mitzvah. He does not have to repeat the bracha. Ois katan yodalet v'yotza l'derech. After he puts them on, he can go on his journey. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'davka hoylech b'raglav oiroichev. This halacha, that you're allowed to put on the tefillin even though it's night because we're not worried that you're going to fall asleep, this only applies if the mode of travel, either that he's walking or he's riding on a horse, In those cases, we're not afraid he's going to fall asleep. Aval Yoshev Ba'agala, but if he's sitting in a wagon, sitting on a bus, he's taking the train, Asur Lahaniach, then he's not allowed to put them on, Shema Yishon Behem, because then there is a fear that he's going to fall asleep. Va'ayin be'biur halacha. Okay, let's take a look at the biur halacha, Dibur HaMaschil, Kevin Shehishkim V'yotza Loderech. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ayin b'Mishnah Berurah, V'ayin ba'teres ekenim u'b'prima godim b'mishpatzei zav sivkatan gimel, shemitzadidim loymar, where these achroinim take the position, af ba'agala nira lahatir, that you could be matir the person to put on tefillin while it's still night, even if he's traveling in an agola. You would think that in agola there's a lot of room to worry that he might fall asleep. These achrayim say you could be matir even in an agola. But the Malbim, maskim lahamachmirin, he agrees with those who are machmir and say that somebody traveling in an agola cannot put on tefillin. Venerally, in the Chavetz Chaim says, it seems to me, the imu misyare shema ya'abdeim, if we could be mitzaref another reason why he's putting on tefillin. If he's also putting on the tefillin not only because it's going to be difficult for him to put them on later, but also because he wants to protect the tefillin, then you should not be machmir af b'yoshev ba'agola, even by somebody who's sitting in a wagon, a train, or a bus, or a car. We learned yesterday in the Mishnah Berurah, Ice Cotton Tess, we brought down the sheet of the Olas Tamid and the Gra, who holds that if you need to protect your tefillin, you're always allowed to put them on at night. So, says the Chavetz Chaim over here, if you have a case where somebody is putting on tefillin early in the morning because he's going out on a journey, and it's going to be hard for him to put them on during the journey, and also he needs to protect the tefillin, then certainly he could put them on even if he's sitting in an agola, because the Gra, the Olas Tamid, they hold that even in regular case, at night, you're allowed to put on tefillin in order to protect them. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, I just want to point out, the Mechaber said that in this case, what you're going to do is, you put on the tefillin early while it's still night, and ukeshegia zmanon, when the time of Mashiach arrives, you're memashmesh b'tefillin, you feel the tefillin, v'yavarech, and you make a bracha. What's the point of being memashmesh b'tefillin? So you might be tempted to say that, especially we could base this on a Mishnah Berurah that we learned earlier in Hilchas Tzitzis. We had in Hilchas Tzitzis that sometimes you're memashmesh b'tzitzis v'yavarech, and the Mishnah Berurah said that when you're memashmesh with the tzitzits, it's a little bit as if you just put them on now. So we might be tempted to say that the reason you have to be memashmesh is because you're about to make the bracha on the tefillin. You put them on earlier. How are you making the bracha now? You put the tefillin on 2 hours ago. How are you making the bracha now? So the answer is, be memashmesh b'tefillin, feel the tefillin. Now it's a shtickle like you're putting them on now, and you can make a bracha. Problem with that is that we learned it's always appropriate to make a bracha on tefillin if you did not yet make the bracha, even if you're already wearing the tefillin. Why? Because every minute that you're wearing the tefillin, b'chol rega v'rega, that you're wearing the tefillin, you're being mekayim a new mitzvah. So, okay, I'm making a bracha now because in the future I'm going to be mekayim a new mitzvah. So I make a bracha and then right away I'm mekayim a new mitzvah. So what do you need the mishmush? The Yeshiva Zatzal Rav Moshe speaks about this in the Igros. And in the Igros Moshe, the Yeshiva Zatzal writes that no, certainly you're not required to be memashmesh in order to make a bracha. You can make a bracha even without the mishmush. The point of making the bracha is only that usually when you make a berachas ha-mitzvah, there's a very clearly identifiable ma'aseh mitzvah, right? You make a bracha on a lulav and esrog, and then you take the lulav and esrog and you shake it. You make a bracha on kol shofar, and then you pick up the shofar and you blow the shofar. Or the Baal Tekeah blows the shofar and you listen. But there's a clear ma'aseh mitzvah. Over here you're making a bracha, and there doesn't seem to be any ma'aseh mitzvah. You're not doing a new ma'aseh that you weren't doing before. So the Yeshiva Zatzal says, in order to take away from that problem, you're memashmish with the tefillin, so that there should be epis a ma'aseh mitzvah when you go and you make the bracha. Okay, now we go to Sif Daled, second line down, Mem Amud Aleph. This is a little bit of a confusing sif, but I'm going to read it to you based on the pirush of the Mishnah Berurah, which we'll see inside. Haya ba baderech. If it's a weekday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, haya ba baderech, somebody is traveling, so somebody went for a long walk. He's got a long walk home from the Beis Medrash. Haya ba baderech, he's walking in the street, utfilin b'roishai, and he's wearing his tefillin on his head. V'shaka alav chama, and it took a little longer than he expected, or it's a little later than he expected, and now it's night, came shkia. And the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us that this shaka alav chama means tzeisakei chavim. It's already late, it's already nightfall. Okay, that's the first case of the mechaber. It's a weekday night, you're walking, and suddenly it's night, and you don't want to take your tefillin off. Why? Well, we're used to nowadays thinking, Laila kayom ya'ir, we're used to walking outside at night and the dark isn't the problem. We've got street lights and everything else. But let's say somebody, in days gone by, somebody is out and it's the end of the month and the moon is not out and it's pitch black and he's not walking on a nice, neat paved road. He's walking out in the fields. And if he's going to hold his tefillin, he's afraid he might drop them. He could stumble and fall and drop the tefillin. So he really doesn't want to take his tefillin off. He wants to keep his tefillin on his head. So that's case number one. Case number two. Or if it's Erev Shabbos. Shahaya Yoshev Beveis HaMedrash. Somebody was sitting on Erev Shabbos in the Beis Medrash learning Torah. Utfilin B'roishai, and he has his tefillin on his head. V'kidei shalav hayom. And now it's Shabbos. Shabbos came. It's now Shabbos. And he has a new problem. He doesn't want to take off his tefillin and leave his tefillin in the Beis Medrash, because like the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, in days gone by, very often the Beis HaKnesses or the Beis HaMedrash was out in the fields. It was out in the Sadeh. It wasn't right in middle of the town necessarily. And it wasn't the Makom Mishumer Miganovim. So he doesn't want to leave his tefillin where they are. He can't take off his tefillin and carry them because there's no Erev, and he can't do Haitzah in Rosh Hashanah. So again, he's faced with a difficulty that he wants to leave his tefillin on. Now let's remember, we paskin that you don't wear tefillin on Shabbos, but it's not a daraisa. It's a drabanan that we don't wear tefillin on Shabbos. The reason we don't wear tefillin on Shabbos is because of a gzeira, Shema, you might come to carry them Dalad Amis in Rishus Harabim. We hold that Shabbos is no chiv of tefillin, but there's only an Isser Daraisa of wearing tefillin on Shabbos. If you wear them l'shem mitzvah, then you're over on Bal Tosef. But other than that, there's no Isser Daraisa of wearing tefillin on Shabbos. Now this person is not going to wear them l'shem mitzvah. He's just going to wear them derech levisha in order to transport them home. So that's he's stuck. It's Friday night. He can't do haitzah. He can't leave them where they are. So he wants to wear them home. So we have two cases over here where somebody wants to wear tefillin at night because of a practical dilemma. The first one is during a weeknight. He's walking and he wants to take them off. He doesn't want to take them off because he's afraid he might drop them. So he wants to wear them on his head. The second case is it's Friday night and he needs to transport them home. And the only way he has to transport them home is to wear them, because if he takes them off, he's going to have a hitzah problem. So the Mechaber says in both of these cases, what do? 3 lines down the middle of the line. Yaniach yadai aleihem. He should place his hand over the tefillin ad sheyagia labayis until he gets home. What's the Mechaber saying? The Mechaber is saying cover up the tefillin and hide them. Yes, you're allowed to wear the tefillin, even though you're wearing tefillin at night, and even though you're wearing tefillin Friday night, you're allowed to wear the tefillin to transport them home, but cover them up and hide them so people shouldn't see that you're wearing them and think that you put them on at night or that you put them on Friday night. Now, why does the Mechaber only mention the tefillin shebarosh? Because generally speaking, it's the tefillin shebarosh that are visible. The tefillin on the yad, we said, generally you cover them because v'haya l'cha la'os, v'lo la'akerim la'os. But the tefillin shebarosh usually are exposed. Right? V'ro kol ami aretz kishem Hashem nikra alecha. So that's usually exposed. But now the Mechaber is saying to cover them. Continues the Mechaber, Ve'im yesh bayis karav l'chayma, shemishtamrim sham. Let's say you're coming from out of the walls of the city, and now you walk into the city, and there's a place right there, there's a house right there, where you can take the tefillin off and they'll be properly protected. So then don't walk through the city covering them. Take them off and put them away in a safe place. Choltzam, take them off, umanichem sham, and leave them there. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Tesvav, V'shaka, Reishazu, the first case over here in Sif Dalid, Mayri B'chayil, is talking about the weeknight, the weekday. Ulacholtzan, ulanasan b'yadai, and the problem is that to take off the tefillin and to carry them in his hands, hu misyare, he's afraid to do that, shem yiplu mimenu baderech, because he's afraid that he might drop them. And therefore, and the Chazal were matir that he could cover up the tefillin with his hands and he could continue to wear them even though he's wearing them at night. To be kevanche mikfar alav ain't tzarich l'choltzam. The Mishnah Berurah says, and many of you might have been wondering this, what exactly is the big deal here? We learned yesterday in Sif Beis that you're not allowed to put on tefillin at night, but if you were wearing the tefillin during the day and it became night, you're allowed to continue wearing them. But let's remember that we said yesterday that the halacha is you're allowed to continue wearing them, ve'ein moirin kain. But we don't paskin like that. We don't teach that to people. We don't teach them that halacha, right? Because we're afraid that they might come to actually put them on at night. So says the Mishnah Berurah over here, Shani hacha demisha yifka by penyita loime shemuta laniach az tefillin. The problem over here is, yes, it's true. You were wearing the tefillin during the day, and technically speaking, you're never mechuyev to remove them when nightfall comes. But still in all, over here we have to give you a special heter. Why? Because you want to walk outside in Rishus Harabim. That's like Moirin Kain. You're showing people that you're wearing tefillin at night. And that you're not allowed to do because they might come to put on tefillin at night. Avol besamuch. But what we learned yesterday, nearby in Sif Beis, that you're allowed to continue wearing the tefillin, Mayri Sheyoshev Bevesai. That's talking about between you and the four walls. That's talking about somebody who's sitting at home and he was wearing his tefillin during the day and it became night. V'hai v'shaka chama pirish. And when the Mechaber uses the phraseology over here, v'shaka chama, that the sun set, pirish soif shkia. He means the end of shkia sachama, to tzesak echavim. Meaning tzesak echavim when it's mamish night. Because if we were talking about twilight, if we were talking here about after Shkia before Tzeis, the time that we call Ben Hashmashas, ain't Sarach L'choltzan, then you wouldn't be mechuyev to take them off, Umayrin Kain Lamaisa. And we would even paskin for people that you're allowed to continue wearing the tefillin during Ben Hashmashas. Now says the Chavetz Chaim, V'chol zeh midina, you should know everything that we're discussing here is only me'ikar adin. B'shem ha'ari zecharayna levracha, al pi Soid, al pi Kabbalah, the Ari says, the Ari writes, Kosuv, he was always very careful to take off his tefillin by Shkias Achama. So that was the first case of the Mechaber. It was a weeknight and somebody was wearing tefillin and he wants to continue wearing them because he's afraid to carry them home. He's afraid he might drop them. We give him a heter to continue wearing them even though it's at night, as long as he covers up the tefillin shibarosh so people don't see it. Now, the second case, Ois Katan Tezayin, is referring to a Friday night. The Kiddush, it became Shabbos. Ritzona Loimar Denasa Ben Hashmashas, it's now Ben Hashmashas. V'i Efshaloi, it's after Shkia Friday night. V'i Efshaloi Lisa Isam Biyadai Lebesai, now he cannot carry the tefillin home, Mipnei Kedusha Shabbos. Because Ben Hashmashas, the Isser Havaitza is an Isser Daraisa. Now he wouldn't be allowed to carry his tefillin home because of Kedusha Shabbos. Ula Hashir Aisam Sham, and to leave the tefillin where he is in Shul, Efshir, he cannot. The Bate Midrashis Shalahem Hayu Basadeh, because their Bate Midrashis were out away from the city. In a location that was not necessarily well protected from Ganovim. Therefore, he tirulay chachamim lenasam alav derech malbush ad beisai. Therefore, the Chazal gave him a heter to continue wearing the tefillin derech malbush, so there's no haitzah until he gets home. However, tzarich lachasoisam, he has to cover them up with his hands, shalo yir'uhu, so no one should see that he's wearing tefillin, shalo yir'uhu shunoisei tefillin lalav b'Shabbos, so that nobody sees that he is wearing tefillin on Shabbos. Note that the Mishnah Berurah does not say over here that no one should see that he's wearing tefillin on Shabbos and at night. Why? Because we're talking about Ben Hashmashos. We're not talking about after Tzeisa Kechavim. In the first case, we were talking about somebody who's coming home after Tzeisa Kechavim, and we have to give him a heter to continue wearing his tefillin at night. Over here, we're talking about Ben Hashmashos, and the reason he can't wear his tefillin is because of Kedusha Shabbos, which is already a problem at Ben Hashmashos because of Safek Daraisa L'Chumra, and you can't risk doing Haitzah during Ben Hashmashos. But during the Ben Hashmashos period, the only problem that applies is the problem that somebody might think you're wearing tefillin on Shabbos, not that he might think you're wearing tefillin at night. Now we go on to Sif Hey. Says the Mechaber. Very interesting case. V'yesh mi she'omer. There is one who says, and this is brought down, the Baragoyla brings this down from Kisvei Mareinu Rav Rebbe Yisrael. Yesh mi she'omer. Shem hispalel tfilas arvis mi ba'od yom. Somebody davened Ma'ariv early. Somebody davened Ma'ariv after Plaga Mincha. He wants to get a good night's sleep, even though he's going to have to stay up to repeat Kriya Shema. But he davened Ma'ariv early, mi ba'od yom. Ad shaloyin yech tefillin. Meantime, he didn't put on tefillin today. So somebody, for whatever reason, did not put on tefillin today. Then he decided he's davening Ma'ariv early. So now it's still early. It's an hour and 15 minutes before Shkia. But he went ahead and he davened Ma'ariv, and then he remembers, oh my goodness, I didn't put on tefillin today. Can I still put on tefillin? I davened Ma'ariv already. So the Mechaber says, Yesh bisha omer shemispal tfilas arvis b'ba'od yom ad shaloyin yech tefillin. He could no longer put on tefillin because he already davened Ma'ariv. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Yud Zayin. Mi ba'od yom, he davened Ma'ariv early. Va'afilu oid hayom gadol kaidem shkia. It might not even be shkia yet. Remember, you could daven Ma'ariv according to the Shitas Rabbi Yehuda that many of us rely on to make early Shabbos. You could daven Ma'ariv and say Kriya Shema already after Plaga Mincha, which is before shkia. So this person davened Ma'ariv early, it's before Shkia. And now we're telling him he can't put on tefillin anymore, even though he didn't put on tefillin today. Explains the Mishnah Berurah why. Because he already declared this time of day to be night. Uzman Shchiva. Not only did he call it night, he called it Zman Shchiva. How did he call it Zman Shchiva, the time for laying down and going to sleep? B'Kriya Shema. Because he relied on the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. What's the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda? You have a chiv deraisa to say Kriya Shema twice a day. B'shachbacha uv'kumecha. When you lie down to go to sleep, uv'kumecha when you get up in the morning. Rabbi Yehuda holds that if the Plaga Mincha could already be called Zman Shchiva. So this person relied on Shittas Rabbi Yehuda, and after Plaga Mincha he davened Ma'ariv and he said Kriya Shema. What does that mean? That means that he is already saying that now is Zman Shchiva. If it's Zman Shchiva, that means it's time to go to sleep. If it's time to go to sleep, then you're not allowed to put on tefillin because Shema Yishan Behem. Maybe you'll sleep. And if you'll sleep, Shema Yafiach Behem. So this person really has a problem. He went ahead by davening Ma'ariv and he declared that it's Zman Shchiva. Now the reason the Mishnah Berurah makes sure to mention this is because the fact that he declared that it's Laila is not really a problem. Because we hold that Laila Zman Tefillinu. We hold that you're allowed to wear tefillin at night. The problem is that he said that it's Zman Shchiva. And Zman Shchiva is antithetical to putting on tefillin, because if it's Zman Shchiva, it's Zman Shina. And if it's Zman Shina, we have to worry Sheba Yishan Behem. And if we have to worry Sheba Yishan Behem, we have to worry Shema Yafiach Behem. So that's why the Mishnah Berurah makes sure to mention Levisha Kfar Hasoy Lazman Azel Laila Uzman Shchiva. B'Kriya Shema U'Tfilah Shal Arvis. So he can't put on tefillin. V'im yaniach by tefillin, and if he's going to go put on tefillin now, Yasar v'yaseu yoim. So now he's going ahead and he's saying, no, it's not night, it's day. The harehen shtei kuloi shesais reizu. So he's doing Tarti Desasri, he's taking on two Kula Tikashitas that contradict each other. On the one hand, he's being Mekel like Rabbi Yehuda, and he's allowing himself to say Kriya Shema after Plaga Mincha before Shkia. And he's saying that it's Man Shchiva. Now he wants to go ahead and he wants to be Mekel, and he wants to say that I could still put on Tefillin. Because, yeah, even though it's Man Shchiva, but it's still Oida Yom Gadol, it's not even Shkia Sachami yet, it's not really night. Hey, buddy, that's Shtei Kulois that are Tarti Desasri. You can't do that. That is the explanation of the Shita that the Mechaber brings down here, this Yesh Mi Sha'omer. However, continues the Chavetz Chaim, and he says, Acha Achroinim Iskimu Lahalacha. The Achroinim conclude and they agree, Halacha Lamaisa, the Mechuyev Lahanichan, that this person who did not yet put on tefillin today, but he already davened Marav early, is Mechuyev to put on tefillin, Ubeli Bracha, but without a Bracha, as long as it is not yet Tzesak Echavim, he's mechuyev to put on tefillin, albeit without a bracha. Now let's say this person himself did not yet daven Marav. Afal pisha tzibur hispalalu, even though the tzibur where he lives already did daven, he lives in a small town, there's 1 million. The tzibur already daven Marav. Now, in the context of many halachas, we find that if there's 1 million and the million already daven Marav, then it's already night, even though you didn't daven. But in the context of this halacha, the Chavetz Chaim says, Ein bekach klum, there's no validity, there's no significance to the fact that the tzibur already davened, v'yanichem bebracha, and he could still put on his tefillin with a bracha, im adayin yoim, as long as it's not yet tzeisak echavim and it's still day, because he personally is not doing Tarti Desasri. But this is only true if he didn't yet put on tefillin at all today. But if he already put on his tefillin, and just he wants to put on tefillin again, if the tzibur already daven Marav, it would not be appropriate for him to put on tefillin. Thank you so much for joining me for Liman HaTorah. The schus of Liman HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Baruch should send Yeshua's refuahs, Parnasa, and Shidduchim Tolos in need, and we should be zeicher to see the Bias Gal Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.